Put the machine on record once again. I don't know. The files are too big, so I'm not able to share them. I don't know. But this guy said he was going to help me. He hadn't come. Okay, so we started off obviously looking at the introduction of political marketing. We've looked at quite a number of theory issues and some limitations of it in terms of its applicability to politics. Now, we're continuing the discussions, and then we are gradually delving into the strategy bit. How do you apply it, in a sense? Now, per the video that we watched, last time we met, have we completed a video, or we should still continue the video and then do the analysis, the discussion? Yes, I'm listening to you.
Well, I think we should continue the video.
Okay. Who else has another opinion? Or actually seconds Bridges' motion?
Seconding Bridges' motion.
Okay, excellent. So we'll play the video. We're using the video as a basis for analysis. So as we watch, we pause, we discuss the scenarios. But please let us all, converse. Let us all chat, because when it becomes one-directional, the class is boring, as you all know. The class has always been interactive. So let's give out the ideas. And the best thing is that once you talk, that's when the idea crystallizes. You get it. If we don't talk, you don't crystallize the ideas. And then, and I think that there's a feeling that sometimes people just want to listen to people's strategic points and things. The thing about strategies is dynamic, all right? So don't feel like, oh, you don't have to, or you don't want to say your strategy or discuss your strategy, that kind of thing. There's a tendency for it. That's why I'm saying that. There's a tendency for that, especially given the atmosphere and then given the political climate. Sometimes there's a feeling that, oh, when you say something, somebody may take it up and things like that. It doesn't work that way. Strategy is dynamic. It can change anytime. You can actually even bring in more depth, to your strategic moves at every point in time. So I think that the best is let yourself go, yeah? Especially when you say things and people are able to evaluate it. You could appreciate the workability of it or not, all right? And you will be able to add more meat to the thinking and then your thoughts, and then you can flesh up your thoughts. So please, regardless, this is a classroom, don't forget. And I keep saying that for me, my classroom is in the sanctity. I don't joke with my classroom. It's a classroom, we'll discuss everything else, and it stays there in class, that's it. Are you with me? So please, let us, let me also sound that my passion, and to be very, very honest with you, my passion is to see quite a number of you becoming strategists in this country. I have been on this, I don't know the number of times I've said it at forums and at events and things. Look here, there is a huge space, not in Ghana, but even across the sub-region, for political strategists to take control of our political parties. When I say take control, it doesn't mean that, we are going to say we are the kingpins and things. But you see, the gospel truth is that we need to have a very refined political space where, just like within the commercial space, people can walk into an office and say, guys, I want to become an MP, all right? What can I do? And you as a strategist with your team, you can ask the questions, which constituency do you want to contest? And immediately we can tell you, okay, for this constituency, it's likely to cost you like 20,000 Ghana cedis. All right, because we have the historic antecedents and the historic information about how much it costs people to run that particular constituency, how much is likely to cost you. And then we can actually say, okay, for our charge, it's about plus 10%. That's how much we're charging you. And we're going to put A, B, C, D, E in place. I don't know whether you share the point I'm making. Do you share the point I'm making? Are you guys following me?
Yes, no.
Yes, Doc, I'm getting you.
Excellent. So in that sense, it means that people no longer have to be in pensive mode thinking, how do I do my t-shirt? How do I do posters? How do I do this? So long as someone is committed to play the democratic role and has the capacity to understand constitution and to learn the constitution, organizing and mobilizing and winning elections shouldn't be the barrier. You know, people must be there, just like we have, Kwabena and his team in advertising, and now you're no longer in advertising, Kwabena. You're now in betting, yeah? Or you're still
Yeah.
to do advertising. You left advertising, all right? But
I'm still marketing.
you're in marketing still, okay. But when I came down, when we worked on the UGBS, you were in advertising.
Yes, I was.
You were in agency, let me put it that way. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So those days and then for now where people can actually go to an agent's.
Doc, I worked with an advertising company before.
Oh, really? Which one did you work with?
Gel Fix Rent a Sign.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Went to outdoor advertising.
Outdoor. Okay, that's great. You see?
One of the big clients in Ghana.
Okay. So you see, so the point is that those of you who have been in agency can understand the point I'm making. Now, commercial firms or businesses can get up and say, okay, we need to run a commercial for product A, and then call Broja and his team and say, guys, how do you actually position this product for me? Do you get it? Now, we should take the political strategy system to that level where you have agencies lined up, in the streets of Accra, political strategists lined up in the street of Accra that would actually say, yeah, you can sign me on to run your campaign for you. Guys, just a minute. Eugene. Yeah. Yeah. I'm in the office. So you can come to the office when I close, we'll go.
No, I still there.
Okay.
I know left. But when you left?
I'll close around 9.
Hey, why?
I'm having a class. All right. So later.
I'm really tired. I'll take the lead.
All right.
When I'm done here. Yeah.
Later.
I'll be here from at 2.
Yeah, but later I'm in a class. All right.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. You see, so whereby you can actually walk into an agency, I mean, a political communication, strategist, and say, I want to run for this office, I want to run for that office, and they can do. I think we can do it, and we must do it because look, this country is all we have. Do you get it? So if we're gonna get democratic systems to work, the business part of the politics shouldn't be thrown away. Currently, the situation that we have, I don't think that all of us in both parties or not in both parties, including CPP, PNC, we don't think that it is the best situation that we have, especially if we have to fall on maybe foreign agents to actually run strategy for us and things like that. How much longer can we wait to still be in the hands of Western countries? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Are you guys with me? So please, let's take this program seriously. And for me, I'm hoping that in the next electoral cycle, even if not this one, which this one I'm sure most of you should be able to play key role in your respective campaigns. But even after that, in the next cycle, I want to see some of you guys in the strategic helm of affairs, managing the campaigns, all right? from the PCs to the parties and to the presidential candidates. Are you with me? And that's why we could actually say that we are contributing to nation building. Otherwise, all these exercises that we're doing, it's nothing. You know, it would amount to nothing. So please let it not sit in books or just have a certificate and say, oh, you hold a MA strategy in political marketing, and so what? It wouldn't count for anything until we start making the impact. Do you get it? Now, one of my students in the last elections, whom actually became one of the campaign team members of some of the campaign, now sits in a very top place. And sometimes I'm asking myself, okay, is she using the expertise actually? You know, but during the campaign, we were on TV, you know, discussing strategy and things. That's where she was discovered, all right, which is fantastic. And joined the campaign team, and I hear the performance was so high, all right. So eventually, when the MPP won the election, she's part of one of the key top, you know, areas. But the question is whether they're applying what was thought and what was learned, you know, especially come this campaign cycle, is crucial, you know. So please let us use it, let us apply it. And when we find ourselves in the circles of conversations, let us use them, let us say them, and let's get people to recognize that we have a certain set of expertise that could be applicable. Are you with me? And let's make the impact. Yeah, it's possible. We can do it. And for me, I want us to create an industry of political strategists, where tomorrow it won't be Dick Morris reference, or it won't be Alistair Campbell reference, but it will be, you know, us our references. You know, maybe Mr. Zuma is a strategist to somebody, you know, Broja is a strategist to somebody, you know, Obri is a strategy. You know, we've got to actually get all these things done, right? Okay, guys, let's go. So which part did we get to in terms of the video? Let me just pull the video here. Where did we get to? Who remembers? By the way, I have downloaded the game change video, full set. So when we're done with this, we'll watch the game change. And I watched the game change the whole of yesterday, Charlie. I've seen it. This is about fourth time I've seen that. And whenever I watch it, I get marvel at the strategies, like the way the guys discuss the things, Charlie. It's amazing. Anyway, so let's finish with the New Labour one. Which part did we get to with the New Labour one, please? Tony Blair.
The battle between Gordon Brown and Tony Blair.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Obri. So let's see. What do you remember the page now? Was it 36 minutes inside it, or okay? Let me just play this.
And that they would go thundering off
to
Afghanistan and sort of nuke the shit out of the place without sort of thinking straight.
Just a minute.
Blair reasoned that the best way to influence the American response was to get as close to the White House as possible.
Can you see it?
9 days after the atrocities, he was on
Yes, sir.
The struggle we take as
Have we gone past here or we're still here?
And I think the spirit that's been shown here in your city is just something remarkable.
Were we here or we've gone past here? Who remembers?
Administration and a much more far-reaching project.
The Prime Minister could have been in no doubt that the President was already conceiving a war against Saddam Hussein. During their meeting at the White House, George Bush said to him, "When we're finished, we're coming back to Iraq."
Do you remember?
I don't remember this part. I don't think we got to this part.
We haven't gotten here, right? Okay, let me just go back.
He was the first Prime Minister in more than 50 years to come to office with no experience of government at any level. And that inexperience soon showed.
Before he was elected, I think Tony Blair assumed the civil service was this wonderful Rolls-Royce machine and you would pull a lever and the thing you wanted would happen on the ground.
Do you remember here? Hello, guys.
Yes, dog.
Yeah. Are we here? Were we here?
No, we were at where he had issues with Gordon Ramsay.
Gordon Brown. Let me just...
Brown, sorry.
To Blair's great relief, Clinton finally declared
below zero temperatures. No place for
Around the kitchen.
Gordon Brown was a remorseless.
Remember exactly what I said, but I think I said something like, are you
I think here.
honestly telling me that on the basis of, a couple of headlines in a few newspapers and a story that isn't even prominently or actually leading the news today in the media, you're going to end my political career for the sake of this? And he said, yes, I'm afraid I am.
I saw at first hand the way that Peter was treated in his second dismissal, and it was one of the most brutal things that I've ever seen. Graham Greene once said that a successful writer had to have a splinter of ice in his heart, and I think the same probably goes for prime ministers, and I think that Tony Blair does have a splinter of ice in his heart.
When he first became leader, the Tories characterised him as Bambi. The idea that he would never be able to take any tough decisions and he was just all fluff. I think that the fact that he was able to sack Peter Mandelson twice is evidence that he is incredibly unsentimental and he just does what he thinks he needs to be done.
Blair's allies complained to him that what he really needed to do was strike against Gordon Brown. He would never be master in his own house so long as the Chancellor was running a rival government from the Treasury. Several times Blair played with the knife, but he could never quite bring himself to wield it.
I'm sure he has thought of sacking Brown and pulled back from it. Whether he was wise to do so again, who knows? But his anger and irritation with Brown was always matched by this generosity towards him, this understanding of why he behaved like he did, and that he felt it was entirely legitimate for someone to want to be Prime Minister.
When they were getting on badly, I think we sort of felt, those of us who worked for both of them, felt like rather like children of a dysfunctional marriage where mum and dad are too busy arguing to be able to talk to the kids. So you'd be sitting waiting for a decision and all that you could hear was the crockery being thrown around the kitchen.
Gordon Brown was a remorseless strategist, which was one reason why he so often overpowered Tony Blair during the first term. Seeking liberation from the shadow of his Chancellor, Tony Blair found it in a conflict abroad.
In the spring of 1999, Tony Blair was faced with the first major foreign crisis of his premiership. The Serbian president Slobodan Milosevic was ramping up the violence against the Muslim majority in Kosovo.
What we are witnessing is mass deportation on a scale that Europe has not seen since the days of Stalin or Hitler.
As tens of thousands of refugees fled to the hills, NATO jets began to attack Serbian positions. The only time Tony Blair had worn a uniform was as a schoolboy cadet, an experience he so loathed he left as soon as he could. Now the teenage pacifist ordered British planes to join the bombing.
This will be a daily pounding until he comes into line with the terms that NATO has laid down, and we intend to go on.
Blair had thrown himself into a conflict which would propel him from pop star premier to conviction-driven lone warrior.
He didn't believe, none of us believed, that you could go on bombing day after day, week after week, month after month, and one day they'd capitulate, because you would have turned Kosovo into a desert. The world doesn't like seeing a small country pulverized day after day. How long will Milosevic go on?
NATO's original calculation that Milosevic would capitulate within 3 days was wrong. Blair's generals told him something had to be done.
Besides anything else, the timetable was such that it gave you some fairly remorseless choices. The Balkan winter, deep snow, well below zero temperatures, no place for refugees to be out in the open. It was getting to a critical point.
A humanitarian disaster on an epic scale was unfolding in Kosovo. To focus public attention on the suffering and to see for himself, Blair visited one of the refugee camps on the Serbian border.
I have very clear memories of the Prime Minister and Mrs. Blair visiting the biggest refugee camp. I think both he and his wife were moved by what they saw. There were dreadful tales of murder, rape, looting. I don't think any human being with an ounce of decency would fail to be moved. And yes, you could see that the Blairs were moved.
Blair was forced to the conclusion that the only way to end this human misery was to threaten a ground invasion. At a private meeting with his generals, he asked them how many British lives might be lost.
He did worry about casualties, and I can remember I said it's extraordinarily difficult because we don't know just how hard the Serbs would fight. We talked about the terrain, which will be very difficult because you either have to go through Albania or up one road where, quite honestly, a flock of sheep could stop an army.
He said that it was the most profound decision that any prime minister could ever make, any human being could make, because you were making a decision that your heart told you not to do, and your head said, this is the best and the only way of saving other lives, thousands of lives.
In Kosovo, Tony Blair was seized with a sense of moral purpose, which he didn't get from the grey details of daily politics. Blair was now convinced that NATO must threaten a ground invasion. But the Prime Minister had a problem. The only power capable of launching one was implacably against the idea.
I believe the campaign is working. Each day we hear reports of desertions in the Serbian army, dissension in Belgrade, unrest in Serbian communities.
The apparent ruling out of ground troops, particularly a position held by Washington, in public at any rate, at the beginning, seemed to me to really weaken the West's position by apparently ruling out the one conclusive action which would bring, because if the bombing didn't work, what then? Pack up and go home. It would probably have been the end of NATO.
Blair was beginning to fear that Kosovo could be the end of him. More than any other leader, he had staked his reputation on a successful outcome. At home and abroad, he was out on a limb. On the 21st of April, Blair flew into Washington for a critical encounter with his old friend, Bill Clinton.
We went straight up to one of the small sitting rooms in the president's private quarters in the White House. And Blair made the case for making contingency plans for a ground assault. And Clinton just sat there quietly while this debate was going on. He was chewing on this unlit cigar, basically not saying anything at all.
The rationale at that point was this is really a European problem. Tony Blair, he was always forceful in his presentation of his arguments, but he has a great spirit about him, and he tries to persuade you with logic and the power of his command of the English language. I had to deal with the reality here, and as did President Clinton.
Rebuffed in private by Clinton, Blair now took to the world stage with an impassioned appeal. In a speech delivered in Chicago, the Prime Minister's instinct for armed intervention against rogue and genocidal regimes was now refined into a doctrine, which he called humanitarian interventionism.
We have learned twice before in this century that appeasement does not work. If we let an evil dictator range unchallenged, we will have to spill infinitely more blood and more treasure to stop him later.
It is very clear from that he believes that there are circumstances in which it is right for the international community to intervene, and he does believe that foreign policy should have a moral purpose. And Kosovo brought these two things together in a very clear way for him.
Tony Blair's hawkishness won him admirers in the American media, but it was beginning to cause serious aggravation at the White House. One of Bill Clinton's officials complained that the Prime Minister was sprinkling too much adrenaline on his cornflakes. Another Clinton aide mocked Blair, saying the Prime Minister thought he'd become Winston Churchill.
That was a very good line. Okay, guys, let's discuss some of the points that we've seen in this particular, segments that we've listened to and that we've seen. Yeah, let's start the conversation. Yeah. Hello. Guys.
Yeah, Doc, we are here.
Yeah, let's start the conversation then. Abdul, can we start the conversation? Because that's the model, isn't it? We listened, we discussed, we raised the points, and then we go along.
Okay, Doc, I will set the tone by what I've observed I'm setting the tone from the ending of the video.
Yeah.
I mean, where Tony Blair where he delivered his speech in Chicago after meeting with the then U.S. President Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
And then he made a very fascinating statement where he said the world, or they needed to head towards a humanitarian interventionist.
Yeah.
I observed that the incidents or the incident in Kosovo was taking a toll on him back home in the UK.
Yeah.
And so you will have observed that, I mean, a couple of his advisors, and if you listen to his foreign policy advisor between 1997 and 2001, what I observed from him was that it was like a tough decision for him to take, having visited the camp and seeing women and children dying and undergoing suffering and all that. So he needed to get, it appeared he needed to get the backing of the US president. And that was why he flew to the US to engage with Bill Clinton. And then after that, he made that fascinating statement by saying that they needed to take a humanitarian interventionist policy. And that sort of got him the support, or the aura around him, that sort of got the US media to give him that kind of hype and support.
Excellent.
Albeit it appeared some of the top gangs at the White House were not so much in support of his policy. That is what I observed.
Excellent.
But from the marketing strategic point of view, I feel that he succeeded in wooing the international support, international as in the US and perhaps, I mean, the other world leaders.
Yeah.
Because of the statement, that singular statement he made, especially in the US. That's my initial observation.
You are fantastically right. See, if you listen to prior to moving into the international space, the narrator said that Tony Blair needed a space to, have a relief, but also to build on his character. Do you get it? Don't forget, we've seen him called a Bambi. You remember?
Yeah.
The guy says that the conservatives christened him Bambi, meaning that he can't take tough decisions.
Sure.
And when he sacked Peter Mandelson, that actually signed up his character as indeed the guy is not just a Bambi, but he's tough. He can take the tough decisions. But that was one instance. Now, when he needed the break from Gordon Brown because of the tension, he latched on the Kosovo, war as an escape to prove a point and to build his own character, his reputation, which is not known because by then he's new into the world stage. All right. So Kosovo became a point for him to prove and for him to demonstrate his foreign policy expertise and foreign policy credentials, as well as to actually gain acceptability within the global geopolitical system. All right. And so the point that you make is that he needed to make certain interventionist position, which he felt that, look, there must be a human interventionism, which in the UN, parlance, we call it HI. In fact, I've done otherwise I'll meet you. Okay, so you realize that, can we hear, please?
Yes, we can hear you, Doc.
Okay, so you realize that Tony Blair needed to do quite a number of things, including the Kosovo campaign, and then to rally, Clinton around, which is UK's biggest ally, which is the US. And if you listen to the American, secretary at the time, he said that Tony Blair made logical arguments, and he sounded very persuasive. And coupled with his skill and expertise in the English language, all right, he was very persuasive and was very energetic. Do you get it? Now, look at the way they were assessing Tony Blair. Do you get it? And this is higher presidential levels, So it means that even at that level of power, their evaluation of whether they can rally around you is not about the idea that there's war and you want to end it or you want to save people, but they are actually asking themselves whether you are a character that they could actually support based on how much energy are you bringing to the conversation. What is your logic, in presenting your debate? And is there enough persuasive power that could rally the president of America and say, okay, I think this is a guy we could actually support? Are you with me? Now, the question is, was Kosovo War something that America could really support anyway in the first place? Must they? Is it a must? Should they go? Why should it take Tony Blair and his logic and his persuasive power and his energy and the half nice, fine English he speaks for Americans to support? Because the Americans, in fairness, said that this is actually a European case. We don't care whether there is conflict in Kosovo or not. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So if you look at how the candidate's brand is evoked, all right, the brand of the candidate, or how the candidate characteristics emerges to become one that could actually rally around votes or rally around world support. Look at it from this conversation that we're having. the kind of things that they're talking about, all right, his logic, his energy, his passion, the way he speaks his English, all right, they all come in. And that's why when you're actually creating or crafting the candidate characteristics and the candidate's brand, you're looking at the persona and how that persona, all right, could bring together. That's why we saw the Gentle Giant during the time of 2000. We saw Asimdre Hine, all right. We saw or we heard, you know, Ghana's Obama, I mean, during President Mohammed's time. And then Akufo-Addo's incorruptibility character. You see the way the characteristics actually come together to form the opinion or the brand image of the candidate. And these are some of the things that we're discussing. How do you build a candidate characteristic that actually connects not only voters, but also can rally world leaders for people to actually back the candidate? These are some of the things that we're looking at. And you realize that even when it comes to the issue of foreign policy, it does not, or it may not necessarily mean that the candidate really feels that we have to go into, you know, what do you call Kosovo and save the people there. But from the beginning, we said that Tony Blair actually needed an escape from domestic issues in order that he could actually do an outside-in kind of character building. Because within Britain, they thought he was a Bambi. Now, he saw a very good opening and said, if I succeed in this foreign policy, that could reflect on me good back home. Are you following the conversation? Hello?
Yes, Doc.
Yeah. So you realize that the foreign policy mission actually has an implication on your domestic perception and the domestic market and how the domestic market actually receives you. All right, they all add up to it. So when it comes to some of these policy decisions and political moves that our parties and our candidates they undertake, we shouldn't actually think that they are all in the name of morality. Sometimes it is for political capital, all right? The building of their own political character for them to emerge either on the global stage or on the local front. And there's two key terms that actually come to mind when we listen to the narrative. The guy says that internationally, Tony Blair was tough. Locally, he wanted to be seen as this compassionate guy. Do you get it? So in the local front, he's presenting a very compassionate, fine guy, funky, this guy, very lovable, somewhat cheerful. And that actually impacted on his local perception as Bambi, that he's so soft. But he needed that toughness. Yeah, but he needed that toughness at the global stage in order to reflect, on that perception, as we can see. All right. So these are some of the points that I've actually, raised from here. And I don't know whether some of you want to add some to it, before we move on to the next one. Any points that you want to add? Yeah. Any points?
Hello, Doc.
Yeah, Broja.
Okay, so I want to see if I can bring a local perspective to the
That's
issue.
right. Mm-hmm.
When we went on a lockdown,
yeah,
for 3 weeks, and the president lifted the lockdown,
yeah,
there was this general upheaval that many countries have gone on a lockdown, and why Ghana should go on just a 3 weeks. We should be copying what, people were citing that the US, many states are still on the lockdown, the UK and everything. So there was a meeting of the West African heads of state. And the president spoke at that meeting. They had a video conference. And he made a strong point that ECOWAS should adopt their own strategies in fighting COVID-19. I saw it as a voice to respond to the criticisms that he was facing back home. You know, but he had made that point on an international platform, and his colleagues accepted it.
So, Brother,
important we come up with that. So later, it was going by what I want to bring to the perspective.
Yeah, Brother, we lost you.
Hello, Doc.
Yeah, we lost you along the line.
Oh, okay, sorry. What I'm saying is that when he spoke at that international platform, he was galvanizing his colleague head of state to accept that we can treat coronavirus, we can have a strategic position from our own perspective. But I felt that it was a direct response to the criticisms he was facing back home. That he lifted the lockdown in response to his own strategy, not in response to the global strategy that everybody is following. So he used that international platform to drum home that point.
Yeah. Okay. So what is the question? Hello. Hello.
Okay, I think Buja was trying to connect it to a local context.
To local context. Okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay. All right, guys. Any other, before I come to add points to this what Buja just said? Any other points?
Yes, Doc, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, so this is Mohammed here.
Yeah, Mohammed, yeah.
Also looking at the Blair's character, right? I think something triggered what he's doing now, right? I mean, him being passionate, soft, and then care for this kind of humanitarian stuff like that. So, I mean, seeing people in Kosovo suffering, I mean, triggers him to embark on this war thing to save the people of Kosovo. So I think that's what I also see from his character as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's within him.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's something triggered that, and then it came out for him to embark on that war.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Any other point? Okay. So yeah, just to add a point that Broja actually made. Now, certainly, you know, world leaders, especially prime ministers and presidents, actually use foreign policies or foreign trips missions to respond to local, you know, attacks. All right. Now, whether there was a global or there's what we can actually call as a global response to the COVID strategy, I doubt it, because if you look at it, the only global response that we probably can talk about, or one that is closer to a global response, is what the World Health Organization actually proposes. Now, what the World Health Organization proposes is actually not the one that even America or Britain is actually following. We've seen on several occasions the disparity between America's own initiatives, British own initiatives, and what the World Health Organization, you know, is doing. Now, what we can say for certain is that globally, there had been shutdowns, and countries are not necessarily, you know, unlocking, you know, so to speak, or officially announcing, you know, what they call unlocking, so to speak. But if you go and ask England, a lot of people who are in England for now, they would even tell you that the lockdown is actually not a lockdown. The same way we see increasing, you know, agitations by the American public, etc. All right. Now, the debate from our own presidency, that there must be an ECOWAS response, perhaps would sync well to the African, position. Why? Because increasingly, where there had been global figures talking about catastrophic, results for African states, that bodies will be in town, being killed, etc. We haven't seen that. And increasingly, people are trying to understand why is it that we haven't seen that catastrophic numbers of bodies in town. Still, the theories are out there, whether it's about the heat, whether it's about the kind of food we eat, whether it's about whatever, but we haven't actually seen that catastrophic one, all right? So perhaps the president is actually sinking in with what majority of other African people are thinking, that perhaps we've been saved by grace or we have some favor. As a result, we should actually look at African specific measures and then, follow that measures accordingly. But certainly, was it a response to the local criticism? Yes. And that is what most leaders do. When they face the heat, they try to rally international or global support so that they can beam it back to home and say, the things that you think I'm doing wrong, look, internationally, it's been accepted as the way forward, all right? And they use that as a firewall. Do you get it? So yes, it is something that, leaders actually do as a way of using that to protect. And in most cases, even when you look at Margaret Thatcher's time, and Margaret Thatcher's, what we call war, in Argentina, what's the name of the island? I've forgotten the island's name. All right. That particular island, when Margaret Thatcher actually won the island, she was very unpopular in England. But when she won that war,
Is it Cayman Island?
Not the Cayman one. The Balkan one. Yeah. All right. Now, when she won that particular war with I think the Trafalgar, the warship, whatever, etc. All right. I think there was a bomb. There was the Argentines actually bombed. There's this oil reserve, the islands that they have, etc. All right. When the Balkan, okay, I think the Balkan War was separate from the.
This is Falkland.
The Falkland War, exactly. Yeah. So when she won the Falkland War, her popularity soared. All right. And that's what world leaders do. Sometimes they use international affairs or foreign policy to rally support. The same way we saw Bush in Iraq. That unfortunately, they went to display this kind of mission accomplished, and there was no mission accomplished. All right. The same way we saw Obama, go to Afghanistan. So whenever they look unpopular, they look over the foreign policy areas as ways to salvage their local, local images and then local, characters, in order that they could actually be protected some way, somehow. So yes, that's a possibility. Okay, all right. Any other points before we continue? So we're looking at the characteristics. Currently, we're looking at how Tony Blair is increasingly building his character, his personality, from a very affable or a very, novice, naive within political circles, power thrown at him in 1997, his own battle with Gordon Brown, overshadowing Gordon Brown being the most intelligent, the first person. Now he became the first, and he's still having this identity crisis with Gordon Brown in terms of power and trying to show off his own muscle and to become the leader and to hold control over the party, and then building his own international reputation, et cetera, et cetera. This is what we're actually looking at. And then we are taking in lessons on how do you use that to build a brand, a candidate brand, for a candidate to be seen as a very softy person into a very tough person who can take the tough decisions and who can actually rally around the global leaders and actually make some successes from a foreign policy perspective. We're looking at all these, as a way of drawing lessons on, candidate branding, and its appeal to its other audiences. I hope the sessions, the lessons are clear. All right. Okay. So shall we continue, or anyone has a question to ask? Someone has
Doug, I have a question to ask.
Okay.
Was the Kosovo War a British war?
No, it was an internal struggle. All right, between, as you know, the Albania. Was it Albania? The Muslim, part of Kosovo, and then there was a Christian, or so to speak, the secular part. And there was a fight. I mean, it's a clash of resources. All right. So there was this tribal or ethnic kind of, agitations going on. And the British people thought that it was unfair for them to stand by to look at, Milosevic and his people, trying to take, control of the land belonging to a section of their own people, despite, although they're Muslims, they are also, of the same, country. So the British people saw that they have a moral duty to intervene. All right. So that's why they went in, but it wasn't their war. It's an internal, kind of displacement. Are you with me?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why Tony Blair was pushing the idea of humanitarian interventionism. All right. That foreign policy must have that humanitarian, because you see, when it comes to foreign policy, there is an idea of no intervention in someone's countries. You can't just, as Professor Mills actually said, you fear them, all right? You can't just jump into somebody's home and then say that, why are you doing that? But from Tony Blair's argument, when governments start to oppress their own people, then the world has a moral duty to intervene, all right? Which is part of the UN Charter, that when governments start to, oppress and try to suppress their own people, UN must intervene. But the point for intervention is very, very, controversial. A series of conversations, discussions, etc. And sometimes by the time they are done, the massacre has actually happened. And that's why Tony Blair said they would actually move in, and he tried to rally the best ally they have, which is America, to support that intervention before the UN could actually step in.
So Doc, are we likely to see similar thing in US? Let's say, in the case of this racist and stuff like that.
Who would even think that one?
It won't happen. It won't
no
happen.
Way. No way. It would never happen. Unless of course maybe the world has gone back and then coming back. Maybe before that will happen.
Really?
I'm telling
you. That's not fair. That's not fair to the world.
Absolutely. That's why they say the world is unfair.
Wow.
But of course, the scale at which we talk about these, states suppressing their own people is not the scale, that America is actually going to. That's way a tip of the iceberg, of course,
Doc, I just have an information for Mohammed.
Yeah.
So, Mohammed, it can't happen because America places value on civic education.
Mm-hmm.
They place value on the American dream. Mm-hmm. So nobody with these two will even dare to do. I mean, the highest they will go is the protest, the looting, and burning of cars, searching of cars, and all that. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, no, forget about anything.
That's it.
Or whatever. No.
And
they speak one language.
Yeah.
These are some of the things that one of the things that brings civil war is different cultures, different tribes, different language, and all that. But America is America. And every American is an American, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and to be very fair to the American security, American security is Constitution first. I mean, with all this, Donald Trump's pronouncement of I'll bring in the National Guard, I'll do this. It's all for shaggy reasons. The National Guard and all this military, American military, there's no way any leader in America could persuade its military to descend on its people, it won't happen. It will never happen. Do you get it? So that is the difference. Unfortunately, in our case, leaders are able to instruct military to go after its own people, unfortunately. All right. Why? Because of the way we structure our military systems and our what do you call our infrastructures, you know. But in the US, it's completely different. And I don't know whether you heard the interview with one of the top police officers who actually asked Donald Trump to shut up if he has nothing positive to say. Did you watch that one?
Yeah.
He said that, in fact, if the president has nothing positive to say, he better shut up. Could you have any of your chiefs say that in this country?
He will resign before he says it.
Resign.
No, BNI.
Resign.
BNI.
You know. So yeah, that's how it is. So America is a fascinating place, you know. Anyhow, not only them, but you know, some of these Western countries, fantastic place. You can say anything that you want. Anyway, all right, let's go ahead. All right, thank you.
With time running out, Blair's defense secretary confronted his American counterpart at a NATO meeting in Germany.
At this meeting, we talked about the eruption, we talked around the subject. Eventually, Bill Cohen said, okay, we all really know why we're here. And I said, well, okay, Bill, I'll tell you. We have come to the conclusion that it must happen. And he said, yeah, thank you very much for that. How many troops are you going to provide? And I said, 50,000. He said, 5,000 troops. I said, no, listen. I said, 50,000 troops. And there was a sort of stunned silence. And he said, for how long? And I said, well, for as long as it takes.
To Blair's great relief, Clinton finally declared in public that all options, including a ground invasion, were on the table, and the Russians made it clear to Milosevic that he could expect no help from them.
I was with Tony for dinner that night, unusually, just the two of us. And then a phone call comes through, and it's electric. It's electric in the room because he says what's happened.
Milosevic has now given his word that he will restore.
Milosevic has agreed to allow unrestricted return for all.
NATO will remain vigilant to ensure that this time he complies and does.
Milosevic had capitulated. Blair had gambled and won. Blair did not strike a triumphalist note with the British public. He told his aides that people didn't want him to do a Thatcher. He got his hero's reception not in Britain, but from the liberated Muslims of Kosovo.
The refugees chanted, Tony, Tony, Tony. And I think he loved it and he felt heroic. I think that was a sincere emotion. He then walked onto that stage bigger and liked it. So I think he got some iron in his belly. Tony was strong, he was right, and I think some new sort of toughness and sense of a role on the international stage came into him.
I think it's probably one of the most remarkable achievements of any British Prime Minister in recent years. I mean, to persuade an American president, against the advice that he was receiving from his military and other advisors, to use American citizens in a large-scale assault on a country, I think was astonishing. And if he had not managed to do that, then I have no doubt whatsoever that Milosevic would have won.
If I'd been Prime Minister and come out of that testing time, worrying time, and I realized I had been right and we had won, I would have thought, hey, I can do this foreign policy stuff. You know, I can do it. And I think it gave him great self-confidence for what was to come.
On the international stage, Blair had tasted the testosterone of high crisis and found himself as a world leader. Kosovo vindicated his faith in his own judgment, his powers of persuasion, and his influence over America, with fateful consequences for the future. From the moment he entered 10 Downing Street, Tony Blair harboured a secret dread would turn out to be just another one-term Labour Prime Minister who messed things up. In the autumn of 2000, it began to look like he would be. The country's fuel supplies were throttled when a few thousand protesters, angry about the price of petrol, started to blockade refineries.
There was a sense in the country of everyone being touched by it and everyone potentially panicking over it. We couldn't get petrol to the pumps, and people couldn't believe that a few protesters in the right strategic places could effectively bring the country to a grinding halt. So there was a huge sense if we didn't crack this very, very quickly, it could do immeasurable damage and potentially bring down the government.
With the general election less than a year away, the last thing Blair needed was for the country to be reminded of old Labour and its record of industrial strife.
Legitimate protest is one thing. Trying to bring the country to a halt is quite another. There can be no excuse whatever for this type of action. We hope within the next 24 hours to have the situation on the way back to normal.
It wasn't. Blair's desperate appeals to get the tankers moving were ignored.
There was certainly a brief moment of panic and of crisis for Tony Blair and for his cabinet, because they were not in charge of the country for a couple of days. And you could see it in his eyes.
Guys, this is a very interesting one. So now let's discuss this one. Very, very, very interesting. Yes, who will start? Who will start? Yeah? Hello?
Hi, Doc.
Yeah, Abdul.
We are here.
Okay, you guys, you have to get the conversation exciting a little bit more. Let's start the conversation. Who will start with this? I mean, let's look at the trajectory. This is someone who has come out of international triumphalism, all right? He's been triumphant internationally. Look at the scale of the Kosovo problem, all right? Look at the scale of the support he needed. He needed the entire America, a whole America. Look, and per the narrator, you know, to move American administration to be behind you on something, not anything but war. It's a big, 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 big issue. You know, in America's history, every American president that commits the American states to war, it's a huge issue. So majority of American presidents or governments, their number one, what do you call, echiwade, like thing that they don't want to do is to commit the country to war. They don't want to do that. So whenever they come into government and there is a tinker of war, or there is any world leader who is trying to talk them into war, they don't like it. But Tony Blair succeeded in getting Clinton to follow him to what do you call, Kosovo. And to be triumphant there. This is massive. Now, what do we see? He comes back home and he's being threatened by a very small crisis like power crisis, you know, fuel, pump. Someone who has actually faced a whole war and he's got America behind him, he's got other European, you know, government behind him, and he's won it. And he's had all this triumphant, you know, feel. He has actually confirmed his own thoughts about his beliefs about his credentials on the foreign policy front. And he believes, as the guy said, well, this foreign policy thing, I actually think that I can do it, all right? So now he feels boasted that at least on the world stage, he has arrived. Then, just getting to elections, this guy is now facing power crisis. Just a power as a fuel pumps. And that is most likely to cause him to be what? A one-term prime minister. And immediately sent him to the memories of old labor. And you see, old labor equals industrial strife. That's what labor had been in opposition for so long, because labor's government are always besieged with demonstrations by the unions. So no labor government want to see demonstrations in the street. Here is the case, the guy was facing one. All right. And then he's thinking, oh my God, this could actually send me to be one-term prime minister. And look at the way he attacked it. The public speech was really tough. Here's Tony Blair sounding tough, but from within, if you listen to what this conservatives guy was actually saying, there was a real panic and there were real fears in his eyes. So you have this guy on the stage delivering speech, performing one action or in one performance, showing toughness and say, this is not acceptable. We're not going to tolerate anyone who would actually do this. But back room, he's really afraid. All right. And amongst his cabinet, they're actually panicking and saying, Jesus Christ, this thing can send us to opposition. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So this is the kind of political communication we're actually talking about. How do you portray the image? Do people see you in the public eye as someone who is really teary, someone who is really panicky, someone who is really confused, doesn't know what to do? Or they actually see you that you're in the grips of things, like you're actually getting the country behind you and then just solving it and say, look, whoever actually messes up this, we're not tolerating it. And then trying to solve it. Or the panickiness of the cabinet is actually coming out and people actually, sending leaks and saying that Charlie, now we have evidence in this country, and if you look at the latter part of the NDC's, tenure, that is Mohammed's tenure in 2016. This is Tony Blair moment.
Yeah.
Completely Tony Blair moment. All right. When we saw the government machinery moving up and down, some are going to Dubai. They say they are bringing some power company, some this. They say some people have gone here. They are bringing this, and that. The coordination, the fear and panic, the uncertainties, the not so sure, the leakages, the allegations, the scandals of some people have gone to take some money from some Ameri deal, some that. Completely chaotic situation. And that's exactly what spelled the collapse of the last NDC administration. Completely. And so if you look at the Tony Blair moment and the moment that the last NDC administration faced with the same issue, power, what lessons do you draw from here? Are you with me?
Yeah, Doc.
Okay, so guys, let's go on.
So,
questions.
Doc, can I come in here?
You can come in, Abdul.
Okay. Doc, first and foremost, I'm trying to understand the communication mix here as a political strategist vis-a-vis difficulties or challenges.
Are you chewing the guinea fowl?
He's doing his.
You've noticed, right? I've just broken my fast. I'm driving home from office, so don't worry.
Okay.
Bear with me. Sorry.
That's all right.
So, Doc, I'm saying that I'm trying to get an understanding.
Yeah.
Between political communication as a strategy.
Yeah.
Vis-a-vis how leadership responds to the challenges or difficulties as and when they arise.
Yeah.
Now, just as you've taken time to explain,
yeah,
you observe from the first part of the video how Tony Blair marshaled the world, i.e. America, and the support he had. You would observe one of the White House guys describing him as intelligent, he spoke good English, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
We expected, I expected that aura that he got from the international arena and then the success or the achievement he got from the war will have come back. He would have come back home and he would have succeeded even the more. But you observe that, just like you said, just a little issue brought about so much challenges. Now, my concern here more is about his communication. If you observe the way he communicated to the folks that were demonstrating, over fuel and so forth. Yeah. He said he does not, it's not a bother to him if people are taking on legitimate protest. However, not trying to bring the country to a standstill is something that he would not, as it may be, accept. And for me, I felt on one hand, he tried to be he tried to speak in a way that will calm down the nerves of the protest. But in another way, he sounded so tough, and that also made the protesters, not to back down.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the narrator in the last words of his, he said it was clearly written in his face that he was not in charge.
Yeah.
And I liken it as well, just like the way you summarized it, because if you look at the last days of the NDC, when you mentioned it, I just started smiling because I recall moments that I watched JM on TV talk, and you can clearly see his persona, his demeanor, his body language. Then you clearly will realize that it really doesn't match with the person that everyone knows him to be.
Yes.
Vis-a-vis anytime he needed to respond to critics, especially that has to do with his subordinates, some scandals here and there, and you realize that he was always forced to respond to it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at it as a political strategist. Doc, what is the best way out when there are difficulties, when there are challenges? What is the best way out as the leader? Do you speak tough? Do you speak in a way to bring on board the people? Is there a mix? Is there a communication mix that the leader have to speak so as to maybe get everyone on board?
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, good point, Abdul. Who else wants to make, before we even come to respond to Abdul, who else has other point to make? Yeah? Kofi didn't come today, right? Guys, I'm not hearing you.
He's not online at the moment.
Actually, he's not online, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, who else wants to make a point before I come in to add on to what Abdul said?
Yeah, Doc.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Mohammed here.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, that was a strong statement from Tony Blair, right?
Yeah.
Trying to say going on strike does not hold. That was a strong statement from him. So I'm just trying to match that with what our current situation is. We've been in a pandemic situation, and then the president, that's Nana Akufo-Addo, I mean, trying to give certain things for free. I mean, at least it did calm some people down.
Mm-hmm.
Free water, free electricity, and this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, strategically, I think these are some of the things that we need to learn as well. I mean, something that will calm the people down, but not to just, I mean, put put petrol into fire. So I think these are some of the strategic points that I've taken so far.
Okay, excellent.
Just put,
all right.
Yeah.
Who else? Who else?
Doc.
Aubrey? Yeah.
Yes, sir. I believe the timing of the strike was close to an election.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I got the video correctly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think politicians the world over tend to start panicking when it gets to elections. So they are, yes, I was struggling with how I was trying to think of the best way he could have acted, because he was trying to be all things, trying to be tough, and to sympathize with them. I think that at a point you need to take a stand. You don't need to let the situation overwhelm you.
Yeah.
Just because it's election time, you try to manage everybody, and then it tends to go against you. I think it's something that especially African leaders tend to also get wrong. That's my own personal view.
Okay, I get you now, definitely. Yeah, who else? Broja? Yeah?
Yeah, Doc.
Yeah. Azuma?
Doc.
Yeah, Azuma.
Yeah. In fact, I've observed that when it comes to foreign policy, Blair was more stronger.
Yeah.
More stronger in terms of foreign policy, simply because of the support he got from America, and also some of his humanitarian policies.
Yeah.
And more especially, a new foreign policy of sending UK to war.
Yeah.
It was a completely new policy that he had a lot of international support.
Yeah.
But basically, when it comes to domestic policy, he had already some disadvantages. And the way they look at him as a leader that does not take decision decisively, was something his competitors at home used against him.
Yeah.
So having gained the popularity internationally, and coming back home with that high spirit, competitors at home wanted to dampen his spirit. So they decided to use his attitudes that were not matching his leadership position against him at home.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at his age, they know his age was sad, that he was not able to take decision. He was looking upon himself as a leader that cannot take strong decisions.
Yeah.
And so his competitors at home used this against him. And that is why I think his impatience also exposed him. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so now let's interrogate some of the issues the more. Now, so as a leader, and the question was that how was he supposed to respond? But you see, one thing we should actually remember here is that the audience, first and foremost, as a leader, for you to speak in the way you should, you have to understand who are you speaking to. All right. Now remember that Tony Blair was not speaking to the entire populace. He was speaking to the union of the tank drivers union. All right. And don't forget, the tank drivers union is actually part of the Labour Party. You see the irony or the dynamics of British politics is that the unions, as the labor unions, are members of the Labour Party. So if you take the Ghana equivalent, all right, you would say that Labour being the left of center, it means the labor unions in this country, like the teachers' unions, the trade unions, also to all those people, all right, are supposed to be members of, let's say, the NDC party or the party of the left. That's how the British politics is actually managed. You know, that's the formation of the British politics. And that's why it says that when you saw the union march, immediately the thought about old labor and the gridlock that old labor governments have faced with unions and had sent them to a position, you know, is always ringing through in Tony Blair's memories and in his mind, and thinking, if I don't take care, these labor unions are going to make me one-term prime minister. So technically speaking, he was speaking to one of his own, or he was speaking to his own people, all right? And so the unions usually in Britain, the unions actually, they ballot and ask, how many of you want to go on demonstration, all right? And then a section of the unions will say, we want to go. A section says, we don't want to go. Now, if the political party, which is remember, there's a labor union and the labor political party. If the labor political party is strong enough to persuade the leadership of the union, they are able to break the front of the union demonstration. Are you following me? Are you following me?
Doc, I'm a bit confused.
Who is confused? Yeah, let me listen.
Yeah, so basically, it's the same people.
Yeah. The union is the Labour Party. The unions are Labour Party members. You know, in the British politics, unions, and that's where we used to call, we have what we call OMOV, one member, one vote. Those days, the unions hold, or they held the party. They elect party leader. So they
actually form the party.
They actually form the party, right? So they form the party, they become the party blocks, the blocks of the party vote, all right? So you see the teachers union will have their own leaders they are pushing. The oil tankers union will have their block of votes within the Labour Party. Maybe farmers union will have a block of votes within the Labour Party. That's how the Labour Party is structured, all right? So the people, the union that Tony Blair was speaking to and was being hashed to, are actually part of the Labour Party who are actually wanting to go on demonstration to cause disaffection for the government, and also to actually cause the intensity of the power issue. So the audience here in question is critical, and that's why Tony Blair was harsh and saying, we are not going to tolerate, we can actually tolerate decent demonstrations, but we're not going to tolerate Labour going back to the gridlock days of putting the country on its knees. It's not going to happen. Are you following me?
Yes.
So that's the reason why the posture. Now, so the question is that in times of crisis, how should the leadership respond, or how should the leader respond in its communication? And I think, Mohammed, you were actually making allusion to Nanado and his COVID responses, and suggesting that he's been compassionate and the way he's been speaking. I don't know that if I'm reflecting what you said, Mohammed.
Sure.
Yeah, but you see, that is not entirely true. Because if you look at Nanado's responses, in most of the COVID, responses that he came to give, Nanado had always been coming swinging. He was never charitable in his speech. He comes swinging and actually coming at people he claims are actually playing politics with the situation. In fact, there was one day that I questioned in one of my media encounters, asking, why is he also not questioning people who are actually playing politics with his offerings and then saying, okay, if by June the way Nanado all my promises in there by June the NDC, why was he not also questioning those people who were using those scripts to actually play politics? And I question that. But if you look at it, majority of times he comes swinging and he has this very stern face and he tells people to follow duly the procedures put in place by the technical people and by the government, and making sure that people actually, respond accordingly. So during crisis, in fact, no leader goes softy during crisis. Most leaders would actually take a very stern position. Why? Because crisis times, you are supposed to demonstrate the ability to pull the country together and the ability to make sure that people see you as having absolute control over the crisis. So the response to you is that in crisis times, leadership response must be stern. Leadership response must be accurate. Leadership response must be clear-cut. There shouldn't be ifs and buts, all right? It has to be one clear line of policy, no wavering. Because immediately you show wavering, it means that you are not sure. And people will start reading interpretation in your actions. And unfortunately, this is what we saw in the latter part of NDC during the crisis, the finance crisis. There were too many delegations going here, going there, obviously, ostensibly in search for solution. But the parties involved were too many. And we saw too many agreements. Today you hear they say car power from here. Tomorrow they say there's a marry this. Tomorrow they say there's that. And when you have that proliferation of responses, the people do not know where to watch and where to expect solution coming from. And unfortunately, that is what actually did or undid the NDC latter day, solution. So even when they brought the solution and people started enjoying the power, by which time power had actually left them in terms of political power, all right? People could not even appreciate that the solution was brought in by the NDC. Why? Because there were too many proliferation of solutions here, solutions and solutions. So people couldn't actually put their mind forward to one straight logo line and say, yes, solution was coming from this particular angle. And that was the mistake. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question, Doc.
Yeah.
Doc, so talking about political communication and the position of the leader or the leadership, how to communicate.
Yeah.
Do you think that the latter days of the NDC and the subtle comments made by the then president, His Excellency John Mahama, when whenever people were complaining about hardships, about power, and so forth and so on, when he made that subtle response that he is now a dead goat, and so, he does not necessarily bother about what the opposition or people were saying. Do you think that commentary or that statement really politically, did it have an impact on him?
It has a lot of impact. No, yeah.
To put Abdul in a proper context, that comment was made in reference to the labor agitations. It was not to the general hardship, but of course, the opposition was able to play that card.
Exactly.
But he was making reference
exactly
to doctors threatening to go on strike. And he was saying that he has seen so many strikes, such that he has become like a dead goat.
Yeah. So that's
I wanted it to be in proper context.
Yeah, I agree.
That's right.
That's the point I was going to make. That comment was not for the public, and usually in communication you don't know when a particular communication would be misquoted or will be misconstrued or will put out. So you want to make sure that whether a comment is for the public or not, it is not said, you know, it is not said completely.
Yeah,
so that it doesn't
it was
actually
even on an international platform.
Exactly.
It was not in Ghana.
Yeah, and even typically, Professor Mills also said once time when he said that, you know, over his dead body, would we see, you know, what do you call, gayism and things, you know, in this country, was also made an international, was an international, you know, journalist that actually interviewed him. But then that reflected good on him back home, you know, because that actually clearly showed Professor Mills' you know, what they call position when it comes to gays and lesbians, where does he tilt towards? But that comment, although it wasn't locally made, it reflected good on him back home, all right? So yeah, in political communication, sometimes you may have an international communication, you know, made somewhere. It will look on you bad back home, or it will look on you good back home. Or sometimes it is not for a particular audience, but it spills over and then it gets onto you. So certainly, yeah, Abdul, as Bridget said, yeah, it wasn't meant for the general public, but then certainly it definitely had a very negative impact, you know, because it come across as insensitive. Okay, all right. Any other points?
Doc, so what I'm picking from you in terms of political leadership in crisis, is coordination and strong leadership.
Fantastic. You would definitely have to show strong leadership. And you see, strong leadership does not mean that you don't show compassion. Strong leadership means that there must be clarity of thought and clarity of direction, all right? And then whatever proposal you put, it must be a clear-cut proposal. There shouldn't be ifs and buts, all right?
Okay.
People should be able to see the line thin, clear, that this is where we're looking at. Immediately there are ifs and buts in your posture, you've lost it. And then you lose the people's sense of direction. Do you get it? And that's why they say that you are leading from behind. Immediately people see you leading from behind, you've lost the fight. Yeah. Okay. Any other points?
Doc, two things I wanted to touch on. First, earlier on, I was going to agree with Boja that the statement of the ex-president was taken out of context and applied, but it was basically because of the pulse of the nation at the time.
Okay.
The second thing that I was going to say was that in terms of clarity, it seems like even when you yourself as a leader are not entirely sure about the action, you need to have a certain confidence about your belief in the decision that you have made. And carries a long way to either whip even your dissenting followers in line, or to get even your opponent to back down from their stance or their position when it is very clear, when you are very confident and clear without seeming to be, maybe I should use the word belligerent about your position. It seems like over the period, especially in Ghana, we've seen various kind of leaders, those that are confident in the way that they communicate and execute their communication. And then those that, like you have said, seem to waver a bit, or their body language does not match the words that they are spewing. And it seems like in our culture, people seem to go off on that. So for example, President Akufo-Addo speaks somewhere and he starts to speak in French, and people get excited about the fact that we have a president that can speak in confidence in that language without using a translator. So he must know what he's saying in that particular scenario. We've seen the same with former President Rawlings, where sometimes what he's saying, we as a people may not agree with, but because of the confidence with which he carries the communication, everybody basically will fall in line and go along with it, even those that have dissenting views.
Yeah, fantastically right. Excellent. All right, good point. All right, so let's continue the video and let's see what comes up next. All right, okay.
Blair was supposed to be the Prime Minister with a magic touch for public opinion. To his bewilderment, he now seemed to have lost it.
I remember Tony Blair just saying, well, they could finish us off. You know, if this doesn't happen soon, if we don't get this back to normal soon, they will finish us off. There's no doubt about it, because it's a question of competence at this point.
With 48 hours to spare, the protests were called off. Blair had survived, just. But now his competence was being questioned more broadly. In 1997, Blair had come to power on a promise to modernise Britain's public services, especially schools and hospitals. 2 years into government, and progress was elusive, to the frustration of no one more than the man who was supposed to be leading it.
You try getting change, you know, in the public sector and public services, and, you know, I bear the scars on my back after 2 years in government. Heaven knows what it'll be like if it's a bit longer.
A big problem stared Blair in the face every time he looked in the mirror. He was the first Prime Minister in more than 50 years to come to office with no experience of government at any level. And that inexperience soon showed.
Before he was elected, I think Tony Blair assumed the civil service was this wonderful Rolls-Royce machine, and you would pull a lever and the thing you wanted would happen on the ground. Within 2 or 3 years, though, I think he was becoming increasingly frustrated. At one point, I remember him gathering a group of permanent secretaries together and saying, well, I'd really like you to be social entrepreneurs, not just classic administrators. I want you to be people who can achieve change, who are at ease with innovation, and so on. And I think about half of them sort of got what he was on about. I think the other half were completely baffled.
I thought from the beginning that...
Charlie, I love this part. You know, guys, did you follow that part?
Yeah, sure.
With the public service people, you know, like the directors of institutions and things like that. All right, and Tony Blair is thinking he can talk to them, and all of a sudden their mindset will change. You know, telling them that, yeah, I want you guys to behave like social entrepreneurs. You know,
and not just administrators.
You know, you see these fascinating things that politicians come to the office with energy, and they think, yeah, Charlie, we're going to get things changed, you know, and then you think, yeah, the public service. Look, the public service is a big issue. You know, the public service is one big of a hell of issue for every country. You know, politicians like Obama type of, yes, we can drive this aspiration, come into office, and they realize that, my friend, it is not as you think at all. And I'm sure these guys, like, is it Muntaka, right? He learned his lessons, you know, when he got bent. And you hear when people in the public service, they tell you how they even get people to sign things that they don't even know that they are signing. You know, it's an absolute nightmare. All right. And here's the case, Tony Blair thinking, oh, I can get them to do things. And then he says, half of them just understood, and half of them, they just watch you and say, this guy, what kind of nonsense is he talking about? Do you get it? It's so interesting. You know. Anyway, any points here?
Doc.
Yeah.
But my observation is that it appears most politicians and their communication, it appears when things aren't going the way they expect, most of the time you see that their communication is directed to the public service. They tend to make statements that seek to suggest that either their secretaries or the directors, or generally the public service, it tends to look like the public service is not working enough, or they're not doing things right enough.
Is it not the case, or I'm wrong?
Doc, is it a case that it's a deliberate attempt by the public service at any point in time to sabotage the government?
No, but the public service is definitely a serious bureaucracy. Look, nothing works there. You know, Professor Bawole will tell you that we in the public administration, we know how we make government works or not. Because when it works, you don't have a job. When it doesn't work, that's where you have a job.
Sure. Wow.
Oh.
This is fascinating.
But that's public administration for you. In public administration, when the system doesn't work, that's where you have a job. Broja, you want to say something? You know?
I not on this line. I wanted to highlight what the narrator said.
Yeah.
That Blair was, one political leader who had come to the table without any experience.
Yeah.
So, yes, I was thinking.
Yeah. Let's hear you on that.
Then, I'm just saying that political leadership, you in political leadership, you require the experience of serving, and rising through the ranks, because the narrator said that inexperience began to show.
Yeah.
And he had to try the public service.
Yeah. Okay. Broja, maybe in future you have to check your internet. But yeah, I think the point that you're making is true. You see, and that's the point I was actually even going to ask. The idea of coming to government, all right, is like finishing first degree, moving from national service into the world of work, all right. At what point do you gain the experience? Do you get it? You get that question? That when young people from the age of 18, they are getting into the world of work, they've been asked, or they are asked to provide or demonstrate years of experience. But the point is that who gives you that years of experience in governance, all right, before you become one? Or where would you actually do an internship for presidency? Are you guys following me?
Yes, Doc.
Where do you get opportunity to do internship for presidency before you become one? So it's a very dicey question of experience, or someone coming into government or coming into administration as an experienced politician. I mean, you could be an experienced politician, but you haven't been president before, which, President Mahama rightly put it one day and said, have you been president before? Certainly, you haven't been. Do you get it? Where do you get that experience, of presidency before you become one? It's a completely dicey question. Do you get it? But I think that there is a broader question that we must actually interrogate. And that is, how does a leader get to be told that they are incompetent? Or how does a leader become questioned of being incompetent? All right, from what we have just watched, from Tony Blair's, and then the guy was actually talking about, he faced the broader question of being incompetent. Let's discuss, let's interrogate that. Yeah? Yeah?
So, Doc.
Yeah.
So, I'm just looking at something.
Yeah.
So, irrespective of the fact that he was being criticized as incompetent and inexperienced, I mean, I'm comparing that time, Ghana and in the UK. Still, things were still better there than here. And why is it the case? Because somewhere around that time, Rawlings was still in power, and he had governed the country for a rather long period. But yet, comparing the two, from what we are watching right now, he's been described as at the time, incompetent and inexperienced. But yet we here had a president or a leader that had rather been in power for a very long time, but yet comparing the two countries, one was way ahead of the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the question remains that how does a leader, get questioned as incompetent? Yeah. How does a leader get questioned as being incompetent?
Okay, I think it's about the narrative that is defined in the community at the time.
Mm-hmm.
If the community decides that these are their indicators of competence, they can begin to question your ability to deliver that. For example, in this case where foreign policy was becoming a conversation that Tony himself had brought to the table, in that case, he would then now suddenly be able to ascribe to competence in foreign policy. If you had rewinded about 6 months prior to that, and they had not gone into Kosovo or anything, then his opponent could have escalated the same humanitarian crisis and said that he's competent because he has not made any endeavors to deliver for the people of.
Excellent. That's a very good point. So you see, the idea or the definition or description of incompetence on a leader is actually, symbolized by your ability or inability to answer certain questions. All right. Here is the case. So part of it, as we have been talking about, is the leader's own responses to crisis. All right. So not necessarily to the solution. All right. Not necessarily the leader's solutions, but the leader's responses to the crisis. All right. So when the crisis hit, how does the leader bring himself about in terms of his own communication expertise, communication skills? All right. The leader's own mobilization skills, the leader's own persuasive abilities. All right. And the leader's own guidance, his ability to guide and to marshal everybody towards a particular line of order. Now, these are the things that if the leader is not able to demonstrate leadership in it, you get to be told of being incompetent. And if you look at Tony Blair's case, for example, with the power crisis, when the unions were voting to go on strike, all right, that's when he was facing the incompetent question. Now, when the leadership of the union was able to, when the Labour Party was able to break the union front and quash the supposed demonstration, the narrator said that Tony Blair was actually saved by a whisker. And at that point, he had a sigh of relief because then he had the ability now to go ahead and to solve the problem, which means there was some lobbying that he was doing within the labor front, the union front, and he was successful in persuading them to call off the strike. All right. So the issue is that the point that a leader gets to be questioned incompetent is when the leader has failed to actually lead, not necessarily to have provided a solution, but what was your leadership in persuasion? What was your leadership in mobilization? What was your leadership in guidance? And what was your leadership in offering hope? All right. When you fail on these points, that's where you get to be questioned of being incompetent. So we have to take note. And as Kwabena said earlier on, even when you are not sure of your own solution, you have to provide leadership for people to believe in it. In fact, you probably may be leading people to hell. It is not at the time that you are going to tell them that I think we are going to hell. My friend, you can't say that.
Oh, really?
You can't say that. See, Churchill had one point. He said that, you know, when you get through to the tunnel, in fact, the other end of the tunnel, you don't know what is there, but you still have to walk through it. Do you get it? Look, when Churchill was actually calling for the code breakers and then asking them to actually throw that Scud missile, all those actions, they didn't know where it was going to lead to. But in his mind, he has to come out of the other side of the tunnel, whether hell or heaven. Do you get the point? So,
yes.
So when you're actually leading, and in front and later you realize that Charlie, that there's a hellfire in front. In leadership, you just don't tell people that, in fact, I think we are going into the hellfire. My friend, you've got to walk through it. You know, that's how it is. So even when you yourself, you're not sure of your solutions, immediately you waver, you've lost the leadership. And that's it, you know. So you've got to actually demonstrate leadership by walking through your belief and making the people believe that the turn that you have taken is the right turn. Once you waver, you're incompetent. All right. So these are some of the lessons that we have to draw. And when we're actually coaching and guiding our candidates and managing their image, these are some of the things we have to be mindful of. Unwavering. All right. Let's move on to the next.
Attitude of Tony Blair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, my question is, I mean, so looking at the current situation, the pandemic situation that we find ourselves in, and the decision of the president to, I mean, ease out some of the restriction, open schools and this kind of stuff, and looking at the numbers we have currently, are we saying, I mean, the president cannot say, listen, guys, I mean, I took the wrong decision. Let's look at the numbers again before we start moving forward. Are you saying the president cannot do that?
We are still in crisis. That's not when you have what you call diagnosis and say that I think I took the wrong decision. You really? See, you make a reflective analysis and you do diagnosis, and then you say that in hindsight, maybe the decision I took, I could have taken a different decision. That's when the crisis is over. Do you get it? Any leader that within crisis period comes out to the people and says that I think I've taken it, mind you, we haven't even gotten out of the crisis yet. Immediately, it will affect every confidence in whatever decision henceforth you take. Because if you think this one was wrong, what shows that tomorrow one is not wrong? The next one, hey, we are sure say this is the one for right decision there. Look, it is just like you have your wife and your family, like your kids, and there's a direction that you're going, and then you take a turn, and then later you realize, oh, I think I had the wrong turn. I'm telling you, your wife will ask you every other turn. She's going to ask you whether you are sure. Do you get it?
So you mean you can't re-strategize?
You can re-strategize, but when you're re-strategizing, the words from you shouldn't be that you think you took the wrong decision yesterday.
Okay.
Because clearly, if you took the wrong decision yesterday, we haven't finished the crisis. And then you are saying you took the wrong decision yesterday. In fact, today, if you tell me another decision, I'm not going to be confident in it.
So in the case of re-strategize, you don't have to communicate. You just have to do it behind the scene.
Yeah, you have to re-strategize and perhaps, you know, have certain other words to demonstrate, you know, a turn. But for you to say that you took the wrong decision yesterday, my friend, you are in grave trouble.
Doc, I think in a situation like that, you may probably have to communicate that as part of your modeling and your planning, you have now reached a point where you can implement this additional approach.
Exactly.
So that the conversation behind you will be about but not to come and sit there and say that I think I was.
Mohammed, if you say you think you're wrong, say that you Everybody was saying, we are dead.
So I think the communication is the thing, right?
Evaluation.
The communication is the thing.
I'm telling you. You see, for a president during crisis, for you to say that you took the wrong decision, then I tell you, Charlie, that day, so one can crank.
But Doc, what is the difference? What is the difference with that saying I took a wrong decision and then saying that I was misled? Aren't they all the same?
You were misled by who? Charlie.
This one there, big point.
Please, this is an academic exercise. We're in class.
It's an academic.
Please, there should be a caveat. This is an academic exercise.
Of course, they know that. Everybody knows that.
I think for clarity, it should be misinformed and not misled.
Thank you.
So Doc, basically, it's just basically managing a situation or managing the perception they have about the situation, basically. If I understand you.
Yeah, you mean from the leadership?
Yes, Doc.
Yeah, I mean, as for leadership, you don't have the luxury for your followers to think that you were not sure, you're clueless about. Even, of course, everybody knows that the presidency is being advised, or you, the president, you are being advised by people. So the decisions to say that I was misled shouldn't even come to the question, because day in and day out, all the decisions that you are taking and you are communicating, it's not coming from you anyway, it's coming from your advisors. So presidents don't speak, or leaders don't speak in the tone of, I was misled or somebody advised me wrongly. No, it is your decision. The buck stops with you. Are you with me, Bani?
Doc. Yes, Doc.
Doc, just an example to what Bani was saying. At the time when food levels were down in the country at a particular point in time, the government of the day chose a narrative of telling the people that, you know what, we are not going to depend on the West. We'll grow our own food, and it is even healthier, it helps us. And they push this communication campaign of Operation Feed Yourself.
Yeah.
If they could have gone another route and said, there's no food, what are we going to do?
Exactly.
Ourselves. But because they communicated the same problem in a particular way, they owned it and got everybody to believe us. We bought into it and we are creating our own food.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Can you imagine if they had said that food, there's no food in the country? It's okay. People will say, hey. You know. So yeah, that's a fantastic example, you know, by saying that, look, we are now growing what we want to eat, etc. Anyway, all right, great points, great contribution. All right, guys, what time do we close? 9 o'clock, right?
Yes, Doc.
Okay, let's continue.
Ministers was that their job was to define the objectives, their job to paint the picture of the new Jerusalem at which they were heading, and then it was the job of the civil service to get there. So if one failed to achieve everything that the new government wanted, this was somehow the fault of the technicians of the civil service. But of course, it's not as simple as that. Government's a big operation. It's like a super tanker. It can't be turned on a sixpence.
Relations between the government and the civil service turned sour, not least because of New Labour's distrust of Whitehall.
There was an inclination to operate more politically, either through ministers and special advisors and those who were sort of more, part of the project. I think that was a mistake. Because I think that the civil service was queuing up to welcome in a new government, and when delivery seemed not to be coming together, Prime Minister and others started to blame the civil service, and there was a sort of tension built up.
The most influential figure in number 10 was not a civil servant, but a former tabloid journalist in charge of presentation.
Guys, let's listen from this. This is now Alistair Campbell coming into the shadows now. Let's look at how he closely managed the media and the entire government system. Now we are bringing him to the shadows.
Blair was completely focused on the idea of Alistair Campbell coming to work for him. Now, partly it was Campbell's journalistic skill, but it was also the strength of Alistair's character.
No advisor in this government or any other has ever been as dominant as Alistair Campbell. Campbell served Blair brilliantly in his first term by projecting an inexperienced and often insecure Prime Minister as a commanding leader.
Alistair Campbell was the kind of power source, the generator.
Guys, before that, do you see the way they walk? Yeah?
Yeah.
Have you seen the way they walk, the briskness?
Yes.
And the smart lookingness? This is all part of the communication, all right? And look at the way they flank the Prime Minister and then the handlers. And mind you, Alistair Campbell and co are not necessarily in government. They are not ministers, but they are the experts that are actually handling the candidate, i.e. Blair. And so the aura, the way they exhume the aura that they exhume actually reflects on the candidate. So if you look at it, they will tell you, whenever Alistair Campbell is there, Blair is much more bolder, he's much more confident, because he knows that Alistair will be giving him notes. Say this, don't say this, do this, don't do this, don't respond to that, etc. So he's much more confident in his own delivery because of Alistair Campbell. Let's watch the way that scenario actually unfolds.
In Downing Street. If there was a meeting which he wasn't at, it was kind of flat. If he came into the room, and if there was a meeting where he was, it had a good crackle from the start. The Prime Minister seemed happier and things seemed to get...
Now look at Alistair Campbell's own posture. Very much like, I really don't care who you are. Are you watching? And if you backtrack a little bit and see the way he comes in with his persona, all right? And as the man is actually saying, if he's in the room or if he doesn't come to a meeting, the meeting is flat. But if he comes into the meeting, he brings extra energy into the room, into the meeting, and make sure that he dominates almost everybody. So before you, as a journalist, you want to ask the Prime Minister questions, Alistair Campbell and his characteristic has subdued your power even before you ask questions. I will backtrack a little bit for you to just watch Campbell's own posture.
Into the room, and if there was a meeting where he was, it had a good crackle from the start. The Prime Minister seemed happier and things seemed to get done.
Alistair Campbell showed day in, day out that nothing the press threw at us, nothing opponents threw at us could faze us. So within the operation, within number 10, you always thought if you had Alistair Campbell on your side, you were going to win the battles that came up.
But Campbell's influence was negative in one crucial respect. He amplified Blair's own weakness for chasing headlines at the expense of securing long-term results.
There was great emphasis on managing the media. Possibly too much emphasis, possibly at the expense of managing policy, but whatever. There was great emphasis on the media, and in government, Alistair was responsible for that. There was a sense, if you got the story right, you'd achieve something, and that's not how government is.
The lack of progress was also a product of Tony Blair's temperament. He was brilliant at the emotional side of politics, the vision stuff. He was much weaker at detail, the practical stuff. He was an actor politician when some things require the attention of an engineer politician.
I think his weaknesses were, how did you actually achieve something? You might have the big idea, you might have the energy to try to drive it through personally, but how did you actually make it work?
At our first meeting after the election, he said, we're going to cut welfare. And I said, Prime Minister, what do you mean cut welfare? He looked slightly bemused at me at this point. And I said, do you mean absolutely or relatively? Do you mean a proportion of GDP or the government budget? He again looked slightly puzzled. And I said, would it help you, Prime Minister, if I prepared you a note? He said that would be incredibly helpful if I prepared a note. And all he had to do was to tick a box to say which one he wanted. And the note came back from his then principal private secretary saying the Prime Minister means cut. There was no decision made at all.
He developed this look, which we always called, I think I coined the phrase.
Okay, now guys, let's throw a little bit more light on Alistair Campbell before we move into the bit of policy, etc. So what is your take on the character Alistair Campbell, as we've seen, and how the narrator actually talks about the way he manages the media and makes sure that the government is seen triumphant by winning the media war or the media narrative? What's your point? Yeah?
I think Alistair Campbell's joining the team, he brought a lot of experience from his journalistic skill, as the narrator excellently put it. You know, I think with his background as a journalist and having practiced, he brought that to bear on the job. You know, and his personal persona. I mean, the way he carried himself, the way he exudes himself, it brought so much light, and you could clearly see from the narrative, and then the way the Prime Minister carried out his duty subsequently when Alistair Campbell joined the team. And you would observe that his character, the character of Alistair Campbell, though it appears it runs in a lot of groups, if I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
There are persons that usually are around perhaps the leader, be it the politician, I mean the chief executive or whoever as it is. And those persons' presence brings a lot of confidence to the leader, and that is exactly what Alistair Campbell posed. And it's clearly indicated that even in his absence during meetings, it was felt. However, it also appeared in the long run that his persona did not also necessarily help the Prime Minister as they expected it. Perhaps because he was now maybe because the attention was more on him rather than perhaps it should have been on the Prime Minister. So I think there needed to be a balance between the persona that Alistair Campbell carries and the way he expected to, as it may be, use it to influence the leadership of the Prime Minister. That is my observation.
Excellent point. Great point.
Look, I agree and disagree with him. So this is what I am seeing from it. The team of advisors around Blair having the depth and understanding to realize that in the era that they had gotten to, it was pretty much an optics game. No matter what they did, if they did not get the public perception right, and the only way to do that is by, at the time, using the media that was available to them, they would not be deemed a success. However, no matter how hard they failed, if they got this perception right, they'll be deemed a success. I think that the advisors made a very good choice in encouraging that Alistair Campbell was brought to the table. And in addition to that, it also insulated Blair by giving them plausible deniability. Where now, when we see things that we think they didn't do right, they are able to immediately pivot and say, well, when you have people like Alistair Campbell, the downside is that you miss certain things. I think it was very deliberate on their part. They knew very well what they were doing. They wanted to build a career for not just when he is the leader of the country, but beyond that. And they have done that successfully using people like Alistair Campbell, where now they've been able to smoothen over the cracks and things that they learned along the way, as they would have since they were young people that were in government. But they have built this brand that has lived beyond their era as leaders of the country, and now they are controlling all sorts of international conversations simply because they've been able to pivot his flaws to other people and amplify his emotional ability to rally people around the cause and lead them towards it.
Great point. Now, you see that these are a bunch of young people, aspirationally young people, who thought that they could change the face of politics in Britain. And if you look at all of them, in fact, per the narrative, the most brilliant, that you could actually say the most wisest, was Gordon Brown. He is the one that they say he's the intellectual, he's the one that is screwed on. In fact, when it comes to policy conversation, he was the guru, all right? Now, Mandelson was this strategist, all right, who is, so to speak, more of the shrewd one, who would always think through the system and give you all these kind of what do you call underworld kind of, Alistair Campbell is this guy who knows how to dazzle the media and then say, okay, bring it on. And he's able to deflect, using his characteristics, deflect every debt on Tony Blair and then let it be his own. And then the media is able to say that, okay, it's Alistair Campbell who's actually manipulating, the number 10. And then make sure that he can actually reflect that from Tony Blair himself, all right? And then, of course, you have Tony Blair himself being the theater, the center of the theater. So you realize that they have all this worked out. And if you look at their posture and their characteristics, their persona, they all fell in line with the kind of job they were supposed to do. So the media comes in and they see Alistair Campbell, all this towering guy, and say, okay, hang on, what do you want to say? Bring it here. Hey, you bring it on. And then he will just rebuff it. Okay, you bring this, and then you will just rebuff it. All because they needed to protect a certain image and a certain narrative to be seen that they are effective in government. So it wasn't even the idea that the policy was right or wrong, but whether they are winning the image war and they are winning the perception of the people and then being seen that they are doing well, all right? So, and this media management stuff is part of modern politics, especially when it comes to modern government or modern governance management. If your media management is weak, I'm telling you, you are not going anywhere. And I remember very clearly during President Kufuor's first term, when Kwabena Japan was the press secretary. I don't know whether people saw the encounters he had with the media. Look, Kwabena Japan was tough. He would stand there and then he would speak his brofo, and then he would just do his things and then shut and then he say, okay, that's it, Japan. Then he will close and then he will go there. And then you hear the Ghanaian media start complaining. Kwabena Japan is arrogant, that type of style. It is part of modern governance. Of course, you must be able to marry it in a way that it doesn't actually go out to say that your governance or your government is arrogant, which Kufuor's first term, we're getting that shot, because of the way Kwabena was actually managing, the media from that specific. Even in John Mahama's time, we had instances with Stamdobe where people thought that he's been arrogant, he's been too protective. This is the kind of style, modern governance actually gets in terms of media management. All right, they shield the presidency, they shield the premiership, they shield the administration. But if you don't manage it well, it becomes another narrative. And in fact, just as Abdul said earlier on, the characteristics of Alistair Campbell now became the news. Just like we have Stan's time, you saw that quite a number of times, Stan Noble becomes the news because of his position and the posture and the way he's actually trying to show, the presidency. But these things are characteristic of modern governance, especially when the party transition from opposition into governance. The management, the media management style is like that. But how do you make sure that it doesn't transcend into the image of arrogance and then start soaring the image of the government in order that becomes the story on its own? This is where you have to really manage it well. Because eventually, Alistair Campbell had to leave Number 10 because he now became the story most of the time. And then the media people started complaining that he's actually shooting them almost every time. He's shutting them down almost every time. And he's detecting the role. All right. Any other view? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Doc, I have a question. So, in the current communication style, the communication style of the current government, what would be your analysis and definition of it?
Yeah, I think that we have had because you see from the beginning we had this was Hamid style, which I don't know how I should define it, whether it was ruthless or it was chaotic or whatever. All right. And then now we had, upon Cromer's, what do you call, era where people thought that it becomes smooth, but somehow too finer and too smoother to the level of, dictation, where people actually, because I've heard quite a number of people and say, he will come and say, Salad, you speak, you don't speak. All right. Which some people like it because it's managing the news and is managing the pressure on the administration. And obviously people who actually are against any form of news management will tell you you're detected. So, but for me, I think that the finest would come in when you rather actually allow the media to flow, but you are able to control the narrative, not necessarily in detecting who should speak, but whether the narrative, you are in control of the narrative in such a way that it doesn't matter what question is thrown at the leadership or is thrown at you, you have absolute control in dictating, the narrative. That has to be the point, as opposed to the selection of who should speak, or the preparation, which I agree that it's part of modern, governance management. In fact, in White House, some media houses are even pre-selected prior to engagement. And we've seen that quite a number of times where CNN people have complained that they haven't actually made a list. All right. But if you want to talk about, the level where you would see that the government communication machinery is actually in control, that's where you actually allow the media to throw shots, but then you have absolute competence in responding to the media's narrative, whether negative or positive, and whether it's in your favor or not, but is able to control it to actually make the prominent in a position within it. I think that's the best fit, and that's where we should actually aim at, get into. All right. Any other point? Any other point? Okay. So shall we go on?
The garden look, in which you would be sitting on one side of the cabinet table, he would be sitting on the other, looking out into the garden. Immediately you started to talk about the complexities of the machinery. You could see his gaze sort of shift, and he'd get a slightly sort of loss of focus on something which involved the nitty-gritty of the machinery of government.
There were many reasons for Tony Blair to regard his first 4 years as a success. Labour had shown voters that it could be trusted not to wreck the economy. Blair had established himself as a leader. And in June 2001, he secured the prize that obsessed him most, a second general election victory.
He now realised he'd been too obsessed. He'd spent too much of his first term worrying about keeping power and not enough time doing things with power. He told himself he'd be much bolder in the future. Yes, his second term would be very different, but not in the way he'd ever imagined.
By the end of his first term in office, Tony Blair had turned out to be a paradoxical prime minister. Hesitant at home, abroad, a crusader.
We have learnt twice before in this century that appeasement does not work. If we let an evil dictator range unchallenged, we will have to spill infinitely more blood and more treasure to stop him later.
He'd already gone to war 3 times and played a key role in the defeat of the Serbian dictator Milosevic in Kosovo.
We are doing what is right for Britain, for Europe, for a world that must know that barbarity cannot be allowed to defeat justice.
Blair had come to believe that he was a prophet for a new kind of moral foreign policy, one that would topple tyrants and spread peace and democracy. This led him into a fateful alliance with an American president and war against Saddam Hussein. The searing aftermath would take Blair's premiership and even his faith in himself to the edge of destruction.
A decidedly autumnal feel to the weather here in London now. Skies are slowly getting brighter, so we're looking at temperatures of 17 or 18 Celsius.
The 11th of September 2001 began like many other routine mornings of Tony Blair's premiership.
It's 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the 11th of September. Tony Blair is preparing to defend private involvement.
The Prime Minister's biggest anxiety that day was the tricky speech he was going to make to the Trades Union Congress. It was a speech he would never deliver.
There were intense fires following the
The television's permanently on in the communications part of number 10. So I was just looking up and saw a plane go into one of the Twin Towers and just thought it was some dreadful accident like most people. Obviously, the president needed to know. And that's when I walked up to the president and bent over and whispered into his right ear, "A second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack."
Tony Blair's reaction was instant and instinctive.
This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world today. I know that you would want to join with me in offering our deepest sympathy to the American people and our absolute shock and outrage at what has happened.
Within hours, it was clear that the atrocities were the work of Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda terror network. Inside 10 Downing Street, an anxious Tony Blair was asking his advisors, what will President Bush do?
Blair's real concern was that there would be, quote unquote, a knee-jerk reaction by the Americans in retribution for the attacks, and that they would go thundering off to Afghanistan and sort of nuke the shit out of the place without sort of thinking straight.
Blair reasoned that the best way to influence the American response was to get as close to the White House as possible. 9 days after the atrocities, he was on a plane to America.
Your struggle we take as our struggle.
And I think the spirit that's been shown here in your city is just something remarkable. And it's that spirit that should inspire us to do what we now need to do to see this thing through.
He was very quick to understand something very profound had changed. Everything that had happened on 9/11 was going to change the way we looked at security policy, foreign policy, indeed the world. And his sense was that it was extremely important for the international community to come together behind the United States and to convey this sense of solidarity.
I remember talking to Tony about his approach to foreign relations, including with the United States, and saying then that regardless of whether we agreed or disagreed with the particular administration policies, it was crucial that we stayed close to the United States wherever possible.
Tony Blair was determined to make the relationship special, even if that meant clasping close the most right-wing president in over half a century. Their relationship had begun in the peaceful February of 2001, when Blair travelled to Camp David to meet George Bush for the first time.
So the Blair people flew in, and they were quite nervous about all this. And I was quite nervous about all this. It was a moment of truth. Would these two guys, they'd get on, wouldn't they? You know, would the chemistry work? And they looked at each other across the table, and Bush said, welcome Camp David, Tony. May I call you Tony? It's great to have you here. Blair, not missing a beat, said, well, it's great to be here, George. Can I call you George? What should we talk about? And off they went. And you sort of knew in the first 50.
All right, guys. I think we have to be ending, right? Okay. So you see the way even the world leaders, they strike relationship. All right. Those that even do not know themselves, you know, you would think that I mean, diplomacy, when it comes to global diplomacy, the question is, when you're going to meet a world leader first time, what do you do? What's the reaction? How do you call them and that kind of thing? And all these things are, you know, part of diplomacy, part of, you know, world stage that you've got to actually pick up. Otherwise, you could actually strike a discord, you know, with your allies or supposedly allies right from the beginning, and then the relationship becomes somehow strange, you know. So yeah, I mean, so we're moving towards another foreign policy again, and I suppose we can actually end, you know, that with the analysis of the candidate with this. And the next section, we will start with the game change, all right, which is also purely on how parties strategize, you know, party strategizes with, you know, what do you call it, a deputy or a candidate, a support candidate, and then the main candidate, etc. But anyway, so we should end here. All right. Any comments on this last versions that we've watched? Yeah. Any discussions? Any opinions? Hello. I can imagine you guys are tired, right? Hello.
Hello, Doc.
Yeah, Benny.
I'll just responding to the hello so that you know we are here.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, okay. So I think we have to close, right? Because
Sure. Quick question before we run off. Okay. I'm just okay. So I'm just thinking, how are you able to? Okay, let me put it this way. What are the needed skill set to first get your first gig, for lack of a better word? Let me use gig.
In terms of strategy.
Yes, and what would be the set of skills you need to first master, getting your experience. So unlike other professions where you'd probably understudy somebody for a bit, and then later start getting your own clients and stuff like that. How would this work?
Okay.
Yes, basically that's my question.
Okay, good. I think that like any other, profession, you have to demonstrate knowledge, deep knowledge in the field, and you have to go out there to canvas for business. Do you get it? I mean, you can't sit down and say, "Oh, I know this," without putting yourself forward. So, one thing that I would say is the majority of you try and do media rounds. All right, try and do discussions, especially the elections coming in. This is our season as political strategists. You have to put yourself forward for media discussions. All right, so TV, radio discussions, even amongst your own colleagues. You are sitting there and asking people, okay, so the next coming election, what's your take on, Nanado Baumia candidacy again? I mean, we've seen a lot in 2016. What else do you think Baumia is bringing on board? For example, what is refreshing or what could be new? Because I mean, they are existing candidate, all right, just like a product. New product. Obviously, there are expectations, but when the product is the same old, what else is that product going to offer you? All right. So you have to pose that question and then perhaps look at perspectives where you think the freshness of Nanado and Baumia can come from. All right. The same way you can pose the same question with John. All right. And then possibly his candidate that he's going to actually bring on board. So for me, I think the essential thing is that we have to stop arguing like we used to. Do you get it? Don't start arguing and debating like those days where, those days Ghana debates. Everybody's, oh, is MPP, oh, NDC, oh, what's Mahama bringing new again? He's been president before, he's been vice candidate before, he's been this before, so why is it? Those ones, I don't think it would bring the level of intellectuality that you're supposed to demonstrate for somebody to think that, really, I think this guy is a strategist. All right. You have to actually sit down and ask yourself, what are the building blocks for, allowing somebody to be a candidate or not to be a candidate? And what are the motivations? All right. And what are some of the rationales behind those things? Now, when you start using those words, all right, people would pay attention and listen to you. All right. So for me, my number one question is stop debating as those days. So when I'm actually debating people, I don't go on that tangent of, oh, he's been there before, so why are you there? Why you want to come again? I don't do that. I will first of all take you on perhaps from constitutional positions, from position of voter psyche, from position of electoral systems, etc. So I'll give you certain building blocks and build my argument. And again, my other thing that I did, in fact, when I came into this country was more of media engagement, media conversation. I will go into debates. I remember one fundamental debate that I had was Kosi Pratt on Visat. All right. In fact, I think I'd been to the country new. I think the first time he met me, I'm sure the man had just looked at this, who is this guy? I mean, I'm nobody, all right? But when we got onto the stage, and then Kokui, and I think it was Kokui, and this guy was actually hosting. Is it Provincial? I've forgotten his name. The kind of debate that I was building, and the kind of words that I was using, even when I disagree with him, the kind of words that I was using to describe my disagreement, he realized that, look, I'm not the kind of, this Ghanaian type of, noisy discussions on radio or on TV, no. And he actually told Kokui that next time if he comes with me, he will like it, So for me, and again, I remember Kennedy Japan, I debated him on his TV, and people were like, hey, I saw you on Kennedy Japan show. I said, yeah. And people were like, Charlie, these are guys you don't, I said, really, I don't really care who you are and what, but I would make sure that I would not lose my sense of judgment, all right, and my refinement because of who you are on set with me. No, I don't do that. I make sure that I stay with my sense of refinement and my sense of judgment. Are you with me? So you can throw whatever noise and things, I'll stay my cool and then pick up my debates and then leave it there. Barney, are you following?
Yes, Doc.
Yeah, so I think TV, radio debates, discussions, and discussions among colleagues, make sure that you are very distinctive in what you say and refined in what you say, and you build structured argument, all right? People will start taking notice. And then make the attempt by writing to people, prepare your proposals. I mean, form your company, have your company, I have my company, my company is called Campaigns and More, right? Which we do event. I mean, we send to candidates. Currently, we are managing some candidates, elsewhere that what do you call in the central and western regions, right? So we send to people, and these are parliamentary candidates, right? So you send to people, and then you tell them, oh, you do this, you do that. Then you have a profile of what services you offer and things like that. And, you give them a glimpse of, so sometimes they will meet you, and then have a conversation with you. They will listen to whether truly you are what you say you are. And then that's it. In fact, I have a future candidate, I have some guy, he's a very young guy, very, very young guy, about age of 21 or so. He said he wants to become president one day. You guys can't believe it, yeah? Somebody at the age of 21, he said he wants to become president, and I'm managing him. Yeah. I'm managing him. He pays me. Yeah, I'm serious.
Oh, then you go chop. if you have started paying at 21, there you go chop.
He pays me. I'm on retainer, So issue will come, he will call me, and then we'll discuss. And he'll say, so what do you think is this? Sometimes we'll meet somewhere, we'll just go and sit. Just buy it, like when you come and call me, and we'll sit at Legon Hall. Sometimes he will call me and say, oh, let's meet at some place. We'll go and sit.
But dog, buying no they pay.
As for buying it, he says it's political marketing class extension. Bro, people are serious. So this guy, he sits. Sometimes we'll go and sit somewhere. We'll discuss the terrain, And sometimes he comes up wavering. And he says he doesn't know which of the parties he should go. Whether he should go here, I said, well, when it comes to ideologies, it's your heart. All right, you've got to actually study and see where you want to move, but you've got to follow the dynamics of the political system. And then start thinking, how do you build your leadership styles and skills and things, So yeah, it works, And from time to time, I do unsolicited, sometimes I see some candidates, and then I send them, proposals if they are interested. Sometimes we'll build issues. Sometimes we'll build. One of the things that we do a lot of times is what do you call media shadowing. We write stories for people, policy positions. So So that you see a story in the news, maybe somebody is writing his position on a policy, you know. Not every time that these people write themselves, all right? So you write for them, you do research on them, on their policy positions, policy agenda, and then you write the piece. When they go through and they like it, they ask you to push it, you know, publish it for them. So look, there are so many services that you can provide. Some that you have to write in speeches for people, you know, the candidates who you manage, you have to manage them by writing their speeches, by doing this, by doing that, you know. Yeah. I don't know whether I've answered your question, Benny.
Yes, Doc.
Yeah. And when it comes to payment, you know, you negotiate. Sometimes you pay on retainer, sometimes to, you know, the person will be paying as and when a particular service is delivered. You get it? And sometimes you have to advise them on their wares, you know, how they look, they come across. But for me, I'm always interested in your conversation. I want to make sure that you are building your capacity in terms of your debate and your argument. You know, I'm always particular about that. So I could be sending you snippets of things that you have to be discussing when you meet with people, etc. All right. And then how do you weave your professional expertise into your political career? You know, this guy I'm telling you, he's an analyst. What do you call? A financial analyst. Young boy. He's financial risk analyst. Charlie, this was people do. Anyway, all right. Any other points? Any other points?
Look, I think that's
we'll call it a day, right? Okay. So the other tape is what we call the game change. I don't know whether any of you have watched it, but I have the full version. So I can't send it on the